Conversations across time. Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across time.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Conversations Across Time. You will remember that last week we were discussing the rise of China, and having a conversation about what happened in the Pacific when the United States reached the Pacific coast and realized there was no more frontier to be conquered. Uh, at any rate, so tonight I am joined by Conversation Across Time show historian Mark Hoffman. Mark, welcome.
It's great to be here, Viv. It really is.
This, I mean, it's great that you and I can have this conversation because when you were portraying uh, Joseph Hay, John Hay or Joseph Hay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Secretary.
When you were portraying John Hay, we were actually talking about something that now is on the screen and the audience can see it, and it is a cartoon, and the cartoon depicts the white man's burden. You want to talk a little bit about that, Mark?
What Kipling did was he wrote a poem. It was really a poem of instruction to the United States what to do with the territories that we acquired from Spain after we defeated them in the Spanish-American War. We acquired Puerto Rico, we acquired the Philippines, we acquired Guam. 8 million brown people of color, and we didn't know what to do with them. There was a debate within the country what to do. So Kipling wrote this poem kind of instructing the people of the United States as to what to do. And basically what he said was this: it was the burden of the white man to take over these territories, use the resources, and set up governments, because the people that inhabited these territories, because they were not of Teutonic or Anglo background, were incapable of governing themselves, and they were incapable of efficiently using the great resources that were in these territories to the maximum advantage. And he said there would be difficulties. They would rebel, they wouldn't like it, but it was well worth it for the quote unquote white man to do this. It was their moral obligation to do this, because these people basically, quote unquote, were barbarians, and they didn't know how to govern because they did not, come from the German or Anglo-Saxon stock, and they would not be able to utilize the resources of the territory to the most efficient way. And this goes even back even further to Manifest Destiny in the United States, where the theory was the Native Americans were barbarians and they didn't know how to use the vast and great resources of the continental United States. So therefore we had the right, the government of the United States and the people of the United States, the descendants of the Anglo-Saxons, had the right to take over these territories and use the resources, because the Native Americans would never be able to use them correctly. And that's what he told the people of the United States. And that is the policy we followed.
That's a policy that's still being followed.
Yes, you cannot accept racism in terms of international relations and dismiss it. It's all part of the same package. There's no reason for people to think, well, we have a racist foreign policy, but we're okay at home, or vice versa. In fact, there's a correlation between the growth of Jim Crow, lynching, the expansion of the Klan again at the turn of the century up till the 1920s, and our American foreign policy towards these people of color. it all ties in together, that the white Anglo-Saxon descendants are superior and they deserve to govern. And it's all based on the theory of John Burgess, who was a political scientist at the time, who came up with the Teutonic germ theory, that only the descendants of the Teutonic tribes had the innate ability to govern and set up governments that would work, and that it was the responsibility of these people to govern the non-Anglo or people of color. And basically, we've been following these policies since. And if you listen to former President Trump and some of his followers, the white supremacists, they articulate the same thing. Donald Trump wouldn't know the difference between John Burgess and Smokey Burgess. Smokey Burgess was a catcher for the Phillies and the Pirates and the Cincinnati Reds. But Donald Trump expands on Burgess' theory when he was president, all the time, when he talked about the shithole countries in Africa, when he said that he wanted to have people of more white people from the Scandinavian countries be allowed to come into the country rather than the people from Africa or the people, Muslim people. And he constantly articulated the theories of John Burgess. And Burgess' basic theory was only the descendants of Anglo-Saxons, the Teutonic to German tribes, had the innate ability to govern. And he didn't even think, and in fact, when you get the voter discrimination, it's basically geared at people of color because it falls right in with Burgess' theory. So,
well, Mark, I just want to say, but in looking at that cartoon, an examination of that cartoon, looking at it closely, we see a depiction of Uncle Sam climbing up to the mountaintop, climbing up towards the mountaintop, and on his back is a basket, and the basket contains people of colors, horrible depictions of people of color. And then ahead of him, we see John Ball, and John Ball, of course, is the British equivalent of Uncle Sam, representing,
right.
and he's got people, and the folk that are on his back are also people of color, and also shows different religions. I mean, because you see someone wearing a turban, and you see what is a classic caricature of what these people felt about people of Jewish people, and John Ball is carrying them up the hill, and the boulders that they're stepping on is oppression and ignorance and vice and superstition. These are all of the things that Kipling's poem sort of indicates were wrong with these others.
Right, and that gave the white Anglo-Saxon Christians the moral duty, in Kipling's view, to rule these people, because he considered them to be barbarians, and it was the moral duty of it, and that's what white man's burden was. The term burden is it's going to be hard. They're not going to accept it, but it's the moral duty of the white man to do this because they are barbarians. And in fact, it's really interesting in the Philippines when they talked about taking the Philippines becoming a possession of the United States. President McKinley said, well, we made it a Christian nation. And what he meant was they made it a Protestant nation because the Spanish had already converted most of the Filipinos to Catholicism. Even the Pope got mad at them for saying that.
Of course, because they were already Christians.
Right, but they're not white Anglo-Saxon. They're not white Anglo-Saxon Christians, because the Spaniards are not the true descendants of the Teutonic Warriors or the Italians. Even though they were Catholics and Christians, they could not rule either. So it was the duty of those descendants, the Germanic people, and and then of course they migrated to England and then to America. And they truly believe, and that's what the white supremacists in the United States believe, they truly believe that only the white people of Anglo-Saxon descent have the ability to govern. And even what's going on now with voter suppression, what's going on,
Oh,
just
yes.
think of how Trump reacted to the hurricane in Puerto Rico, and how he talked about aid to them, and how he reacted when there was a hurricane in Texas. It just shows you the attitude towards the people of color that inhabit American possessions. And that attitude permeates not only the foreign policy, but domestic policy. And the problem is this: we're never going to be able to reconcile our difference with China or any of the other countries that are non quote unquote white Anglo-Saxon if we continue to think they're inferior to us. If we're not negotiating with them as equals, we'll never reach any kind of agreement that will satisfy and make the world a better place.
And that and therein is the problem, because what we see is that they've justified their imperialistic attitudes by saying that these people are subhuman, and they're also not able, they're also just saying that the natural resources that occur in these countries need to be, the white man needs to take over those, because these natives, these cannibals, these all of these things that they call people of color don't know what to do with their resources. So it's not only racist, it's economically exploitive, because they are coming in and taking the natural resources that exist in these various locations.
But the interesting is they don't think they're racist. They think they have a superior morality. I mean, it's the same. It's the same mentality that, you know, where the South would justify slavery. Yeah, well, you know, they didn't know how to, you know, live by themselves. They're better off on the plantation. It's the same mentality that, you know, that permeated all of that, and it still exists. That's what the white supremacist movement in this country internally has the same philosophy as the white man's burden at the turn of the century was towards the American possessions. It's the same philosophy that the people of color, the immigrants of Muslim descent, Puerto Ricans, they do not have the ability to govern, but they're moving in this country, get citizenship. If they have the right to vote, they will start governing, and that will be the downfall of this country, because they're not the descendants of the Teutonic tribes, and they don't know how to govern. And that's been the policy, and it all ties in together.
And that definitely ties into the voter suppression that we are now
No doubt about it.
witnessing, because you've got these people saying that these people are not of a mindset that they need to know. They need to be involved with choosing representatives to govern them, because they're not Teutonic, and they don't come from the germ of the Teutonic people.
And it's the same thing after the Civil War, when before, you know, during Radical Reconstruction, which they did a lot of good things during Radical Reconstruction when blacks were elected to the state legislatures and Congress. But if you look at the writings of the you know, the pro-segregationists, it was corrupt, and they didn't know how to govern. And it's the same thing they talk about in the possessions we had. And it all goes back to Burgess's theory that only the descendants of, you know, the Teutonic Germanic tribes of Europe, that the Angles and the Saxons, have the germ, quote, to govern.
And Burgess was a professor at Columbia University.
Yes.
He is considered the father of political science.
Yes.
And Theodore Roosevelt, who we appeared on the show last week, Theodore Roosevelt was a student of Burgess, and actually gave him credit for helping him form his race theory. And I just want us to be clear, because when we talk about tying this into the rise of China, as you said, we are never going to reach a place of any sort of satisfactory resolution as long as the white man's burden is the underlying notion that guides the discussion. And it is. And it simply is.
China's a growing power, and it's hard for the people that advocate white man's burden to say, how could these Chinese people do it? They're not Christian, they're not Anglo-Saxons, they're not descendants from the Teutonic. How are they able to do this? And it throws a monkey wrench into their whole theory. So so China has to cheat. China must be cheating because they can't be doing it on their own. China must be the baddie. Then they must be starting to. I mean, Trump advocated this all the time. That's all he blamed for the pandemic, for the turn down in the
Yes.
economy. It's the Chinese flu, and it's this. The Chinese do this, and we got to stop them from trade. And we don't say that about any of our other competitors in the world.
Yeah.
That we don't say it about England. We don't say it about Denmark. So it all ties in together, and we'll never come to resolution. Just like we won't come to resolution domestically until we accept people as equals and we deal with them on an equal and on a level playing field.
And that was one of the reasons it was so important for us to spend these past few weeks discussing the rise of China.
Yes.
Because China took a very, very methodical approach. They adapted portions or sections of communism and socialism. And what they've been able to do is become a major economic force. And that has all happened because they were being ignored by other countries because they were as inferior. They were being ignored by the Teutonic element because they felt that China was inferior. Can we just for a moment talk about the fact that once the United States had expanded to the geographical limits to the Pacific Ocean, as to how they looked out for another frontier to conquer. They had already taken advantage of the Native American people. Now they're looking for new frontiers and wanting to justify imperialism.
It all falls right in the line. Once we were, from ocean to ocean, and
Yes.
and most historians say it's around 1890. Then we move right into becoming looking at the rest of the world,
Yes.
and seeing where we could explore, and that leads to the Spanish American War and the acquiring territories.
Yes.
We got Hawaii before that, and we annexed it. But then once we have Hawaii, that opens the door for trade with Japan and China and the Philippines. And then of course we need guarantees that we'll be able to make a safe route. You can't. I mean, the trip was around South America was treacherous and dangerous, and not that. So
Yes.
that leads to the building of the canal. That leads to the big stick policy of Roosevelt, who was a guest on the show, and it all ties in. 1890. Most historians agree the continental United States is settled. When do we
Yes.
start white man's burden and then and moving toward imperialism right after that? It all ties in together.
And that is certainly where we are. That's certainly where we are today, and it is what we are experiencing in terms of the political outlook of what is going on. Because there's, of course, as you know, one of the fears that is happening right now is that there's a concern that China and Russia will join together and take over the United States position as the major superpower.
Well, that could happen. I mean, our theory about American exceptionalism. I mean, countries grow and they get strong and they become economically viable. And what are we going to do? Go to war to stop it? The best thing is to do is to treat them as equals and negotiate so the world's a better place for everybody, especially with the problems we have now that you can't solve unilaterally with climate change and things
Yes.
like that. And I will say to you, there's a better chance of the United States being destroyed internally at this point than any kind of economic and political unity between Russia and China.
And that is as a result of internal policies and the internal unrest that the FBI has documented, by the way. This is not, we're not talking science fiction. This is documented by the intelligence community that what will happen to the United States, the major danger that is confronting the United States is from within. And these and it's all precipitated by the white man's burden mindset.
They're afraid, as they see the demographics changing, that people of color will have a greater say in government. They truly believe in the purity of the government. You can have other people, but they can't have equal rights. They can act as slave labor or whatever it is, but they cannot govern because they do not have the Teutonic Germanic tradition of the white Anglo-Saxons to govern. And that they truly believe that. Now, it's going to take time to educate people to understand that that's not going to work, and it's only going to lead to the downfall of the country, not to the growth of the country and the expansion.
What's interesting about that, Mark, when you talk about the Teutonic germ, that goes back to 9 AD. I mean, that's the people of the forest, that Teutonic race that defeated Rome and therefore were superior.
Well, that's what Burgess said. They were strong enough to defeat Rome, and they must be something special. Now, they didn't have true democracy. They had kings. Yeah, they had
they had tribes,
tribal councils, right?
Yes.
But I think he kind of wanted to make the Teutons fit his theory, rather get his theory from the Teutons. He wanted to expound the theory of white supremacy.
And so so Burgess just using the forest people, the Teutonic people, as the vehicle that would allow him to be able to expand upon the theory that he already held of the racial inferiority of all others other than the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And so therefore using the Teutonic people was just the vehicle that he used for them, but it was to support his already held belief of the superiority of whites and the white man's burden. Of course, Kipling follows that and follows that whole theory and comes up with the white man's burden. I mean, that's essentially where we are.
Yeah, but and the thing with Kipling is he anticipated the problems. He said it's worth it, but there's going to be problems because people are not. But but he anticipated. And the thing that boggles my mind is how many people and how many followers Burgess had, and who believed that. I mean, he was the guiding light. He was like the star, and people believe. And I guess maybe it's what they wanted to believe, so that makes it easier for him to expound on that in his classes.
What I find interesting is that Columbia University has really not taken the Burgess theory to task. I mean, he founded their school of political science.
Right.
There are statues around Columbia University of Burgess, and he's regarded as a scholar. I mean, there might be a little bit, you might hear little murmurings, but nothing that actually attack. And Columbia University, which we all hold in such high esteem, Columbia University is not coming out and acknowledging that their political science department and a large part of their university was devoted to something that was based upon racism. That's not a story that's being told.
That's true. I'm not a big advocate of cancel culture, but that the hold him in the esteem that people hold him in, like, if he was the father of political science at the university level in the United States, and to see where it led and to see where it's leading, it to me is very disturbing. That and when they talk about, I mean, you can't teach certain things in public schools, and the states are teaching laws teaching about slavery and what really happened, and yet they allowed these kind of things to go on at the university level. I don't believe in censorship, but it's crazy that people are willing to accept it. I mean, Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt loved them. The many of the noted Supreme Court justices at the time studied with them. So, I mean, it's a theory that, and unfortunately, it's a theory that still pervades. People don't like to talk about it, but it still is manifest. And I hate to use that term because we use it with manifest destiny, but it's still manifest in the minds of a large portion of the American population. And that's
And I think when in I think wrapping up our these past few weeks when we were talking about the rise of China, it's important for us to have an understanding that it all is based upon an underlying lie, the
yes,
white man's burden.
yes, yes,
It's it was a lie when Kipling wrote it. It still remains a lie, but it is a lie that the government operates out of. There it's within under the surface, all of the countries and territories that the United States has acquired, and all of the people that they have sought to express some sort of benevolence towards have been used and abused by policies that stem from the notion of the white man's burden.
yeah. They justified it.
Yes.
Made it seem okay. So we're doing a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yes.
We're being moral. We're helping these people, now that really weren't. But that's the nobody. I mean, if I think Hitler would deny he was anti-Semitic, he would just say, "I'm doing it for the good of Germany, cleansing the German blood for the good of the country." So nobody so they can justify it for the common good, for the betterment of everybody, and not look at in the long run what's going to be the betterment for the world and betterment for the country. I mean, it's very short.
Well, ending with that cartoon back up on the screen, it is important that we here at Conversations Across Time engage our audience and give them some information that perhaps they did not have, or they had and they simply forgot, because it synthesizes into where we are today politically. And it is important for us to do that. So I thank you, Mark. This has been really great.
It was great. And hopefully we can, come to a better place in the world.
Well, you know what? The one thing that we do is we're trying to do our part here at Conversations Across Time. And I thank you, the audience, for joining us. And we will see you next week with another interesting Conversations Across Time. Good night.